Greetings, mathematicians. We are way out with our dates here, but let's add a title, Reasonable Answers, and we are on 11 left and 11 right. All right, and for time, I've gone ahead and framed out some of these items. And when we're watching this, if you are keeping up with your digital notebook, or your physical notebook rather, you can pause this video to get this set up. All right. Unit 1, Lesson 11, Reasonable Answers. And let's go ahead and get that objective written together. All right, our objective. I will estimate sums and differences of fractions and mixed numbers and decide if the answer is reasonable. So let's go ahead and read it one more time with me. I will estimate sums and differences of fractions and mixed numbers and decide if the answer is reasonable. Well, I think our objective might actually be a bit of a run-on sentence. But if we look at the end here, decide if the answer is reasonable. That's the word from our title here. So what do we think reasonable means? Well, for this, we want to know if it is realistic. Are we close? Close to the truth. And just as a quick reminder, when we're talking sums, we are talking about addition. When we're talking about differences, we are talking about subtraction. All right. And for this lesson, you guys are going to have a couple of vocab terms. Same with me, benchmark, estimate, and round. Now, when we're talking about a benchmark, we are specifically talking about common fractions. Common fractional measures. And some examples of a benchmark fraction would be 0. If we have less, are we close to 0? Are we close to a quarter? Are we a third? Are we a half? Are we 3/4? We probably have 2/3 in there as well. These are just very common fractions. And since I'm using a denominator of 4, I could say either 4/4 or 1 whole. So we want to look at a problem and decide, using benchmark fractions, where the answer might be. So these are your most common, would be 0, half, and whole. These are some other common fractions that could be used as benchmarks. Second term here, we're looking at estimate. So that means we're making a guess, squiggly equals. It's going to be about. Say it with me, about. So if I had a fraction, let me use a number line. Let's put a half in the middle. Let's put nothing on here, and let's put 1 whole here. I could say 3/4. Where would 3/4 go? It's between a half and a whole. So I could say 3/4 is here. Is it closer to 0 or closer to 1? I would say closer to 1. So I could look at a fraction with 3/4 and say it's about 1 whole. So I could estimate and say 3/4 is about 1. Now, rounding's a wee bit different. Rounding has rules. So we need to use rounding rules. And for those of you that have had some of our great teachers at Monterey Highlands, you might have heard 5 or more up the score, 4 or less, let it rest. When we're talking about fractions, we want to go to the halfway point. So if I have, for example, 1/3, 1/3 would land here on my number line. Is it more than half or less than half? It's closer to 0, isn't it? So if it's less than half, I would round down. If it's more than half, I would round up. For instance, the fraction 7/8 is here. It's almost 1. It's so close. In this case, I would round it up to 1. Estimating is more about visually finding the space and saying it's about, but rounding we have rules. If we go past the halfway mark, we need to round up. If it's less than half, we need to round down. All right. Let's take a look. Well, I'll leave that out for a second. If you need to get caught up on your notes, you can go ahead and pause here. And if you are ready, you can come on with me to the next page. All right, and for the sake of this lesson, most of what we're going to be talking about will be using a number line. So let's see. If we had this number line and we're looking for 5/8, where would it go on the number line? So let's identify our denominator. So 8 total parts. So if I had to make an equivalent fraction for 1, it would be 8/8 is equal to 1. So if this is 8/8, halfway would be how many over 8? 4/8. So let's look. Where would 5/8 go? To the right of the middle or to the left? I think it would go right about here. So I could say 5/8. It's greater than 4/8. So let's use our benchmark fraction. Is 5/8 closer to 0, closer to half, or closer to 1? Now I know if I'm using my rounding, I could say I'm going to round it up. It's greater than half. I could say it's 1. I could also, I think it's a little more accurate because is it closer to half or closer to 1? It's closer to half. So I could estimate and say 5/8 is about half. That is a true statement. We could also say 5/8 rounds up to 1 whole, but this one is a little more truthful. Now, this is a tricky assignment, and this is one where I'm going to recommend we take a look at our workbook. So let's look in the classwork. Book. Page 25 and 26. During our work time today, I'd like you to work on both of these pages. And during our share out, we will actually go and look at the answers to these. So you're going to have to use the class workbook today. All right. I'll see you at about 11:10. All right. Have a great day.